Welcome everybody to another episode of One Man's Tracks. Today's the 50th review Valentine's Day special. I'm rocking all red. I'm talking about a band who rocks a name with red in it, and you've read the title of the video. We're talking about Simply Red. That name comes from the lead man Mick Hucknall's beautiful curly ginger hair. He creates this incredibly undeniable throwback 70s American soul sound, but he's a British guy in the 80s, so it really is kind of a out of left field feeling when you first pick it up and put it on. He is the only consistent member throughout the entire Simply Red career, which spans at this point 35 years. It, however, started out with this initial lineup of David Fryman, Chris Joyce, Tim Kellett, Tony Bowers, and Fritz McIntyre. I know it's a lot of names, and of course Fryman left the band after only recording one song and was replaced by Sylvan Richardson, who, along with a number of other guest musicians, put together this project. This is the 1985 debut album through Elektra and Asylum Records. This is Simply Red's picture book. It's a passionate, soul-filled 45 minutes of poppy, funky, soft new wave that's expertly delivered through Hucknall's impassioned and just incredible vocal performance. His throwback style has inspired me to make this throwback review, so let him and his crew take you on a time trip back to the mid-80s. Hell, before the mid-80s. This feels like it came out in the 70s. They cruise you right in on a funky disco beat. The track's called Come to My Aid. It's an Earth, Wind, and Fire inspired, even trumpets and all, and I love how it just grabs you, pulls you in with that cool energy, and then Hucknall just startles you with his soulful voice. I love it as an intro. It unfortunately sounds a whole lot like their biggest hit off this album, so when it comes on I actually get excited for that track, but I still really do appreciate this one for what it's worth. Furthering that vocal introduction, you've got a inflective, reflective, jazzy piece titled Saddle Red. It's smooth as any and swept away to a smoky bar in like the 50s or something. It tends to drag on a bit, but there's some nice horns that carry the end of this track. Look at you now. It's just a simple, quick, fun little new wave number that's even catchy while it's on, but honestly it's just a blip on this album when you look back at it. Now for a soft, swinging, soulful Talking Heads cover of Heaven. I'm maybe a bit biased towards this track because I'm such a big fan of the original, but I tend to enjoy the original a bit more than this slow, even more depressing version. Jericho is the longest track on the album at over 6 minutes. The narrative is told from the perspective of a big businessman, maybe a big music executive who's telling you the way to fortune and fame and essentially making you a puppet for him to make him more money, and if you're not going to play along, you're not going to get to go to the ball. It's got some catchy moments here and there. It's fun while it's on, but similar to Look at You Now, I kind of forget it after it's gone. That's probably partly due to the fact that they follow it up with a cover that they've truly taken ownership of. It was a song originally recorded in '82 by the Valentine Brothers. Thank you very much. It's titled Money's Too Tight to Mention, and it sees a return to that sound from the opening track, but it's just energized right to the max. This song rides in on a riff that I don't know if the Eurythmics took it from the original recording of this, but it sounds just like the intro to Sweet Dreams, and it was released a year after the original recording, but 2 years before this song. Either way, it's super catchy and grabby from the get-go, and this British translation really hopefully brought more attention to the original track, and this is so soul-filled and funky that it's probably the reason you have this album if you've bought it. And if that's not the reason you bought it, they follow it up with their most successful single. It was one that Hucknall wrote when he was only 17 years old. He originally recorded it with his band, the Frantic Elevators, but re-recorded it with a new chorus and just kind of a revamped style. This is Holding Back the Years. I'll keep holding on. Such a beautiful ballad. It conveys the feeling of looking kind of longingly out of a window on a rainy day. Mick says it's all about that feeling of when you're ready to leave your family home and make your mark, but the outside world is scary, so you're holding back the years. The last few tracks kind of suffer from the same curse of being fun while they're on, but soon forgotten afterwards. You've got Open Up the Red Box, which is just kind of a generic funk soul piece with a decent groove, and then No Direction feels like it's Mick doing a Michael Jackson impersonation over a Talking Heads instrumental. Fun, but once again, it's no direction, no direction, no direction, no direction, no direction, no direction. And then you forget about it. Closing out with the title track, this one feels headsy, but in a completely different way. Where now the delivery is much more burny. The instrumental does pretty much the same thing. Maybe it's a touch more orchestral than the song Facts of Life. Put it on after this album and tell me they don't sound similar. As similar and as those influences tend to shine, while Simply Red's picture book is on, I am along for the ride. This CD being over 35 years old, and their many other releases have never found their way to me until just a few months ago when I grabbed it on a whim. This blue-eyed soul singer and his groovy crew have finally found me with this delightful debut and totally caught my attention. By '96, Mick was the only remaining original member of Simply Red, and he released a few albums between that point and 2000 before being dropped by his label with just kind of various musicians. He set up the website simplyred.com, and his future releases through that were basically as successful as with his label, so I'm sure he made a bunch more money just being independent in that regard. His lineup from 2003 to 2010 were consistent until they broke up after releasing their 10th and, at the time, final album. However, on their 30th anniversary of this album, they got back together, put forward another record, and have since released their 12th and 14th top 10 UK selling album. Incredible stuff, incredibly iconic at this point, and continuing to push that throwback soulful sound, but adding kind of updates as the technology updates throughout the time. So with an album they released, I think their most popular album, Stars, that album had programmed drums as well as real drums. It's an interesting thing. It's hugely popular, and I don't know, I've heard mixed reviews, but for the most part it's received pretty positively. So if you enjoyed this, I'd recommend check out Stars, and then check out Blue Eyed Soul, their most recent release. I'm impressed by it. I'm continuously blown away by the singing, of course, but really the entire mood and the groove that's created with the incredibly talented musicians Mick puts behind him just completes the whole thing and just drives the sound forward. If that's still not enough Mick Hucknall for you, he released 2 solo albums, one in 2008 and one in 2012, essentially just throwing another batch of talented artists behind him to support his beautiful voice. That's right there down in the description for your listening pleasure, as well as all those other albums I've mentioned. Thanks for listening and watching another episode of One Man's Tracks. Leave a like if you made it this far in the video. Make sure you can subscribe for next week's fun, free flashback to another random CD I've picked up and enjoyed off the thrift shop shelves. Click here for another video, and here's a video that YouTube thinks you're gonna like. Here's another place you can subscribe. Come to my aid. Come to my aid. I got a little clip on the back of my hat to keep it on. Tiny little hat.